So we've come to Covent Garden to see my friend Tom Lucy at the Top Secret Comedy Club to find out how we can save comedy in the UK. Tom Lucy, thanks for coming on the show. How are you?
I'm very well, yeah. Thanks for having me.
So we're here at the Top Secret Comedy Club in London, and it means a lot to you, this place, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is sort of the place where I sort of started stand-up, maybe like 6-7 years ago. I was sort of 16, 17 years old, and I used to come down here basically like 5 nights a week and try and get on stage, and eventually got on at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and then gradually worked my way down to 8 o'clock.
Wow.
And yeah, it's still here, and it's become like a proper sort of cult. London, I think anyone who lives in London who loves comedy will know about this place.
So when you was a young boy, you always wanted to be a comedian, or do you have other goals?
Yeah, no, it was weird. I never really had any other sort of ambitions. It was always what I wanted to do. So I used to come to all the London clubs when I was really young, too young to even be in them, I think, and just watch, you know, all these people who are now on TV. You know, Jack Whitehall, Ramesh Ranganathan, Rob Beckett. I used to watch them all when they were unknown, and then try and get on stage myself, and then you just work your way up. It's a real like sort of meritocracy, I think, comedy. So if you're good, I think you find your way.
Well, the people you just mentioned actually aren't that much older than you, so you know that must have been quite inspiring to know they're quite young. I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. Well, particularly with Jack, he was sort of the only person I saw who was like quite a young guy who was doing well in stand-up. Most other stand-up comedians tended to be like in their 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
Or it traditionally was quite an old man thing to do.
Chubby Brown.
Yeah, it has this reputation for being like for slightly older men.
Yeah.
And to be fair,
and not very PC.
Yeah, right. But to be fair, I think there's a reason why older comedians tend to be better, because they have a bit more life experience, and ultimately, like, comedy is about life experience, and so that's why I think you tend to get better as you get older. Whereas if you're a young guy trying to do stand-up, it's quite hard to find things to talk about that people older than you in the crowd give a shit about, because if you're sat in the crowd and someone 10 years younger than you is on stage, there is an element of like, well, what the fuck does he know? So I think it's quite hard to sort of be young and say things that people can relate to.
Have you got a gig that you think of right now and that was the most memorable show?
It was probably, I mean, there's a show at the Comedy Store called The Gong Show. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I've heard of it, yeah.
And it's for all new acts, and you go on stage, and the aim of the night is that you've got to try and survive 5 minutes. So you go on and everybody's terrible, and the audience are they're like rallied up into some sort of like frenzy. So they're booing and shouting, and if you can do 5 minutes without getting kicked off, then you beat the gong. And when I was 16, I went to do that, and I was so sort of petrified, and I went on with this like 5 minutes of stuff I'd written, and I was like shaking, and I managed to get through the 5 minutes. And then that feeling of coming off, because that was probably the first gig I did that went really well.
Right.
So it was the first time I sort of thought, oh, I actually can do this.
Yeah. And
then I remember walking home and sort of having this feeling of like, oh, this is what I want to do now. I know I can do it. And it was kind of, that sticks out.
What's next for Tom Lucy?
Well, I think it's just waiting for these gigs to come back, really. I mean, there's other things that comedians can do. We can write and we can do TV stuff, but the main bread and butter for all comedians is places like this, live gigs, audiences, and I think I could speak for all comedians that everyone's just can't wait to get back to doing shows like this. I mean, this is probably the longest anyone's ever gone without doing a gig. So I feel it, and I think from all the comedians I've spoken to, everyone's just raring to get back.
I asked you about your most memorable experience. What's the worst experience you've ever had? Have you had a really bad heckler one day?
There's too many to even mention. The worst thing I've seen here, seeing as we're here, there's a great comedian called James Loveridge, and he was on stage downstairs. We're in the upstairs room, but in the downstairs room, and he said something. It was packed. It's like Saturday night. It's like 400 people in there, and he said something that obviously someone didn't like. And there was a bloke at the back of the room who threw a pint glass over the heads of like 200 people, and it came past James, who was on stage, and smashed against his back wall, and everyone just went silent for like 5 seconds. And James, I mean, it missed James by like a foot or something. It was crazy. I think you can watch that on YouTube.
Really?
I think someone filmed it.
Can we share that? Yeah. Can we share that after?
You could probably show that clip, because they have a camera downstairs that just films constantly. So you can probably watch that. But that was probably the craziest thing I've seen.
Well, it certainly is a tricky life to be a comedian, but I think anyone that can get up and make people laugh, it's just incredible. It's the best thing in the world to laugh and be with friends and have an experience. So I can't wait to see you back on the stage.
Thanks,
and fingers crossed the comedy world is saved, especially in London, because I need to come and check you out at this place.
Yeah, come down, Top Secret Comedy Club.
Thank you very much, Tom.